Continuing coverage in our top story, tariffs. President Donald Trump signed an order on Saturday imposing sweeping tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China. These are set to go into effect on Tuesday. The duties included 25% tariff on all goods coming in from Mexico and Canada and a 10% tariff on Chinese products. The one exception, a reduced 10% tariff on Canadian energy exports. Now, those tariffs from the White House already triggering a retaliation from Canada. Our northern neighbors firing back with a 25% tariff on 155 billion Canadian dollars worth of American goods. Mexico also promising retaliatory tariffs, though the specifics of those are not yet known. Joining us now to discuss these tariffs more is Joshua Halperin, CEO of Getting to Global and a former U.S. commercial diplomat. Thank you so much for joining us, Josh.
Catalina, it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Joshua, tariffs are really nothing new, right? In fact, we currently have tariffs, more targeted ones on China. This includes 25% tariffs on battery parts, 100% tariffs on electric cars, 100% tariffs on syringes and needles, just to name a few. But these are much more sweeping and now involve Canada and Mexico. So would love to get your perspective on these tariffs and the retaliation from our neighbors.
Sure, it's a great question. Right now, look, tariffs are a tool, but they must be part of a larger strategy, right? They can help level the playing field, but a lot of times they can end up having more harm than good if not done in a more comprehensive fashion. A great example is when we did this last time during the original Trump administration. We put tariffs on China. What ended up happening? A lot of great things started to look positive for U.S. businesses, but in the end, a lot of Chinese went over to Mexico. They built much stronger trade ties, which will last for decades. They started to diversify where they're getting products into and ultimately coming back into the U.S. So without comprehensive closing the gaps on Chinese-owned manufacturing in Mexico and the component parts of those, without building alternative supply chains like better ties into India, Vietnam, Latin America, you're still going to find that it's not going to create the impact immediately that you might hope.
And speaking of impact, a lot of folks are concerned that the impact is really going to be felt mostly by consumers, right? The 25% on Canada and Mexico, 10% on China. Are we going to see the 25% change in our receipts at the grocery store soon? Or what other factors could impact how much of that tariff really gets passed on to American consumers?
Yeah, it's a great question. To me, there's no magic here. If we're going to pay more or we're going to have more tariffs on something, it is going to affect us right here at home. Great example, I've got a company I work with. I won't show their name, but they make this wonderful, these speakers inside when you're sleeping. It's something that I love. When the first tariffs hit, this was made in Pennsylvania, but they had a component in there that came from China. 25% increase in their costs ended up being passed on to consumers, and consumers went elsewhere. They went to a lot of Chinese-made products, wholly made Chinese products that are still, even with the trade tariffs, more competitive than some of our products here. So you're still going to see a problem unless you have some other factors like currency fluctuations. If you have a stronger U.S. dollar, that could offset some of the price hikes. Supply chain shifts maybe into Vietnam, India, Latin America, but none of that stuff's going to happen right away. So you're going to see costs go up, especially for those small and medium-made product, medium companies. The larger companies will weather that. They're probably stockpiling, but at the same time, eventually that ends too. If you go to the pump today, you're going to pay, but eventually you're going to have a problem later down the road when that stuff wears off and you start to get into that inventory, which is another issue.
You know, and I want to talk specifically about something you just brought up, which is the stockpiling, the front loading, as we hear. Talk to me about that. It sounds like a lot of businesses that have the ability have been front loading. As soon as President Donald Trump won the election, they started this process of trying to bring in goods and stockpiling them in anticipation of these potential tariffs. Talk to me a little bit about how that process works and who exactly can engage in such a strategic move as that.
Yeah, the big companies obviously have the ability, they have the power with the manufacturers to say, hey, put me first. I got another great company I brought up, Justice Juice, right? They've got American-made product, but their bags for their supplements actually gets printed in China. Well, I just found out we got 4 more weeks to wait because manufacturing shifted to help the big guys get their products and their supplies in first before they get to the rest of them. So it's going to have a major impact. And at the end of the day, even the big companies, when you're stockpiling, eventually that runs out. Also, other changes, if the dollar starts to increase or have greater power and these things start to shift, they're going to have stockpiled and sitting on inventory that they may not obviously be able to get to kind of sell off quick enough. It also depends. If you're perishable goods, this has no impact. Stockpiling only really works for some of the sectors where they can sit there in the tech, automotive, agricultural, those spaces where they've got more kind of products that are able to weather that time frame on the shelf.
Right, longer shelf lives. That makes a lot of sense. So talk to me a little bit about the idea of protecting American companies. Could this actually be something that is really beneficial to some of our domestic producers?
It could be if you're in place to already bring your operations over here or near shore into, let's say, Latin America, you could still be able to operate and be competitive. But let's be honest, a lot of our products, the manufacturing in America, we love to stand up and say America's economy is going to be boosted by manufacturing in America. And on a mass scale, that ship sailed a long time ago. So where are opportunities? We have opportunities for niche products, for technology, for our services. But when it comes to our consumer goods products, there's another aspect that people aren't talking about, which is the Chinese technology dominance. They're fully vertically integrated. So when we hit tariffs at 25, even 50%, a lot of them can still compete. Why? Because they have the three things you need right now in selling products into the world. You need a place to sell them, a marketplace. They've got that. They've got TikTok. They got what? 75% of Americans have their eyeballs on TikTok. So they've got a marketplace to sell. They have the product because they're manufacturing all the stuff. And the one thing that you need now with digital e-commerce is you need to know how to sell on that marketplace, not in the old days where you just bring a table. You have to figure out how to penetrate. They have all the agencies, the digital agencies that are coming over from China that are helping their own Chinese manufacturers with their newly branded products that are made from the backs of our design work. And they're selling it on the #1 platform for sales, which is TikTok. They've also got Shein. They've also got Temu. All these platforms, they have a fully penetratable kind of market into the U.S., and that's going to be a major problem for most of our companies to really even figure out. And they're already struggling. The top 10 companies sold on TikTok, those products are mostly Chinese-owned or Chinese related in some way, where the owners know the people at TikTok, they're calling them, and they're selling these products. So it's really hard to compete on all fronts, whether you've got tariffs or not.
Well, something we will keep tracking in the days and weeks ahead. Joshua Halpern, CEO of Getting to Global, former U.S. commercial diplomat, thank you so much for your expertise and your time.
Catalina, thank you, and thanks for all your work.